Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the Hamas terrorist group is set to release 20 living hostages from the Gaza Strip on Monday. Meanwhile, President Trump is set to visit Israel the same day the hostages are released. President Trump has good news for troops despite the government shutdown. Find out more about the announcement and the worries that remain. The leaders of the Chinese regime had, quote, a bad moment, but everything is okay now. That's the message President Trump sent out after he threatened a 100% tariff hike on China for what he called Beijing's great trade hostility on rare earth export limits. With President Trump flying to the Middle East, two guests join us to unpack the latest in the upcoming hostage release and the president's peace plan. With digital devices everywhere, how can we protect our vision? An eye doctor shares practical tips and reveals what most people don't know about corrective lenses. And popular national parks are partially reopening despite the government shutdown. A professor at Clemson University in South Carolina says the protected green spaces offer something critical, the chance to reconnect with nature in the digital age.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In the Middle East, the Hamas terrorist group is set to release 20 living hostages from the Gaza Strip early Monday. President Trump is also set to visit Israel the same day. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
On Sunday, Israel's government spokesperson gave an important update regarding the hostages held in the Gaza Strip.
We are expecting all 20 of our living hostages to be released together at one time to the Red Cross.
The father of a hostage expressed mixed emotions as only the living hostages are set to return on Monday.
Hopefully a new chapter of the state of Israel will begin, but also there's a lot of anxiety because there are still 28 families that do not know if they will be reunited with their loved ones. And those 28 hostages, they need to come back.
The family of Israeli hostage Segev Kalfon, who is believed to still be alive, was seen packing some of his favorite belongings ahead of their much-anticipated reunion. The 20 living hostages are set to be received by Israeli hospitals, where they will receive medical treatment if needed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently visited one of the facilities, and he said this on Sunday.
Everywhere we fought, we won. But in the same breath, I must tell you, the campaign is not over. There are still very great security challenges ahead of us. Some of our enemies are trying to rebuild themselves to attack us again. And as we say, we're on it.
And on the same day, billboards and signs were up in Israel, thanking President Trump for his efforts to end the war in Gaza and release the hostages. This comes as President Trump is set to visit Israel on Monday, the same day the hostages are set to be released. Israel's prison system is also set to release 250 Palestinian prisoners and 1,700 detainees who were captured during the war in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, in Gaza City, crowds of people were seen moving about as the ceasefire continues.
We were so happy about the ceasefire that safety and security have returned. This is the most important thing. Despite the destruction and everything we went through, thank God once the truce was announced, life returned to normalcy.
Israeli troops recently pulled back from their positions in the Gaza Strip, but still remain in the territory. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And just in, the president spoke moments ago before departing for Israel. Here's what he said.
This is a very special event. They had 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before. Usually if you have one cheering, the other isn't. The other is the opposite. This is the first time everybody is amazed and they're thrilled, and it's an honor to be involved, and we're going to have an amazing time, and it's going to be something that's never happened before.
The president told reporters, quote, the war is over and that the ceasefire is going to hold. National Guard troops sent to Illinois by President Trump can stay in the state, but they can't be deployed to protect federal property or go on patrol for now. An appeals court made the decision yesterday. This comes after a federal judge on Thursday ruled to temporarily block the National Guard deployment for at least 2 weeks. The appeals court yesterday granted a pause in the case until it can hear further arguments. President Trump says funds are available to pay U.S. military members so they don't miss their upcoming paychecks despite the government shutdown. The money to pay them is coming out of unused Pentagon research and development funds. $8 billion are currently available from the previous funding period. The shutdown is entering its third week. If the government reopens, the research funds will not have to be diverted. President Trump promised at a Navy event last weekend that the shutdown would not affect troops' pay. The upcoming October 15th payday could have been the first time during the ongoing shutdown that the troops would miss a check. But there is still concern about funds for the next check. A bill to have troops receive funding for pay despite the overall lack of government funding was not successful in Congress. The question also remains if U.S. Coast Guard members will receive pay since they operate under the Department of Homeland Security. And U.S. and China relations are experiencing big turbulence over the past 72 hours following Beijing's sudden rare earth restrictions announced earlier this week. President Trump earlier today said, "Don't worry about China," adding that Chinese regime leader just, quote, "had a bad moment." It's his latest comment about Beijing after he vowed to impose a 100% additional tariff on China for what he described as its sudden great trade hostility. Beijing responded today. NTD's Flora Hua has more on the story.
President Trump posted the latest update on Truth Social after Beijing pushed back on his tariff hike threats. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce responded earlier on Sunday. It did not threaten any specific tariffs on U.S. goods in retaliation, but said China is not afraid of a trade war with the U.S. It also said China's new export controls don't constitute export bans, adding that applications meeting China's standards will be approved. Beijing also warned that applications for military-related purposes will be denied. Beijing's new restrictions issued earlier this week target a wide range of rare earth products that are critical for both high-end tech manufacturing and military applications. China dominates the global refinement of rare earth. Following China's statement, the U.S. Trade Representative Greer said the U.S. won't allow China to continue its power grab of rare earth minerals. Here's the ambassador responding to China's reaction at Fox News' The Sunday Briefing earlier today.
Well, their announcement today, they didn't announce anything specific. Again, I think that they've realized they've overstepped. And remember, we've had a deal in place with China since May where we said we'll keep our broad tariffs in check if you keep sending us rare earth magnets. We've kept our broad tariffs in check, and they've decided to expand their controls on rare earths. So clearly there's a violation of our agreement there, so it makes sense that the president would take an enforcement action or propose an enforcement action.
Greer also said the U.S. wasn't notified ahead of Beijing's move. Instead, they found out about it from public sources and then reached out to their Chinese counterparts. The top trade negotiator did not rule out the possibility of a Trump-Xi meeting at the end of the month. On Friday, President Trump hinted he would cancel that meeting as he condemned China for, quote, great trade hostility.
Just want to confirm, have you canceled your meeting with President Xi? And
no, I haven't canceled, but I don't know that we're going to have it. But I'm going to be there regardless, so I would assume we might have it. But they hit the world with something that really is not anything that people are going to do, and it was shocking. Where did that come from? It was just that was out of the blue, right? Out of the blue, they came up with this whole import-export concept, and nobody knew anything about it.
The Trump administration did not make the tariff hike on China a done deal. Back in China, insider sources hint the Chinese regime might be going through a big power shakeup. A former CCP official said insider sources informed him that Xi might suffer a stroke earlier this week. NTD cannot independently verify the source. President Trump's remark that some very strange things are happening in China has fueled speculations. We will keep you updated. Flora Hua, NTD News.
As President Trump vows to impose sweeping tariffs on China, the regime's malign practices are once again in the spotlight. The question is, how should Washington handle the Chinese Communist Party? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
You concerned about national security threats related to China? Absolutely, I am. In fact, they're out there in Oklahoma. We have several farms that have been owned by China. I think the state government is tweaking that to where that can't be any longer, but nevertheless, there's a reason for them confiscating those farms.
I think if the tariffs would actually get us out of the grip that China has on us, I would definitely be for the tariffs.
A lot of farmland by military bases, I think that's beyond just buying farmland. Very concerning to me.
Oh, I definitely think it's a major threat, stealing our technology and taking it home. We need to guard that and not being able to allow that to happen.
I think we've been asleep at the wheel in an effort to, bolster goodwill internationally, but I was a student at the University of Minnesota in graduate school, and this was in the 80s, a lot of Chinese students, and they were nice to visit with and so forth. But I think we gave them a lot of technology. I do think we need to be cautious.
Let's say reciprocity across the board. Do you think China's going to allow that? If we do the same thing to them, do you think China's going to allow that?
No way. They're not going to allow us to buy anything next to a Chinese military base, so to speak, if it even exists. And we shouldn't allow them to do it.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they like it, and I think they want to take some measures. I'm sure there's going to be some back and forth, but I really do hope we extend our country's interests into just protecting specifically the land around our military bases.
I doubt if they will. They're pretty centralized decision-making and planning. We're a democracy, a republic, so it's harder for us to be all on the same page.
I can't see that they probably would, because they are used to winning over us. And so let me just say it this way. I don't think they're going to let that happen without some sort of recourse.
I don't see them doing that. They've never really stood up to any demands from anyone. They've pretty much done what they've wanted to do, and everybody else has just took it.
Coming up, President Trump flying to the Middle East, planning to greet the Israeli hostages in person. Two guests join us to unpack the latest in the upcoming hostage release and President Trump's peace plan. And with digital devices everywhere, how can we protect our vision? An eye doctor shares practical tips and reveals what most people don't know about corrective lenses. Details just after a quick break. We're going to continue with foreign policy because Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he had a phone call with President Trump. They reportedly discussed strengthening Ukraine's air defense, resilience, and long-range capabilities. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Postar, has the Ukraine update.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia fears the possibility of the United States providing us with Tomahawks, and that this fear was a good sign that this kind of pressure can be effective in pushing Russian President Vladimir Putin to seek to achieve peace.
I just spoke with President Trump for the second time in recent days. We are working closely with the United States to strengthen ourselves, our air defense, all our defensive capabilities.
And a shopping center in Russian-controlled Donetsk in Ukraine was set on fire during a late-evening Ukrainian drone attack on Saturday. That's according to Russian authorities, who say there was no immediate information available on casualties. Russian air defense reportedly shot down more than 70 Ukrainian drones over the past 24 hours. Donetsk has been under control of pro-Russian separatists since 2014 and was formally annexed by Russia in 2022 among 3 other regions. The move was condemned as illegal by most countries at the United Nations General Assembly. Also, Ukrainian forces recently fired US-made HIMARS systems at Russian military in the Donetsk region. HIMARS are ground-launched artillery that have been crucial to Ukraine's fight with Russia. The advanced weapons are more precise and offer a longer range than other artillery systems, allowing Kiev to strike Russian targets further behind the front lines. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
A strong nor'easter is unleashing damaging wind gusts and flooding as it moves along the east coast. New Jersey is now under a state of emergency and is expected to last through Monday. The storm's greatest risks will come from coastal flooding potential as it moves north. That will mainly impact areas from North Carolina to the New Jersey coast. Authorities in Georgetown, South Carolina said they rescued several motorists trapped by floodwaters after nearly 10 inches of rain fell in the past 24 hours. Portions of North Carolina's Highway 12 are closed due to ocean overwash. In multiple states, wind gusts of more than 50 miles per hour have been observed. According to the FAA, multiple airports, including Boston Logan, D.C.'s Reagan National, Newark Liberty, JFK, LaGuardia, and Philadelphia, have had weather-related ground delays. And as digital devices take up more of our daily lives, how can we keep our eyes healthy? In this episode of Vital Signs, Dr. Rani Banik, a neuro-ophthalmologist and practitioner of integrative medicine, sits down with Brendan Fallon to share tips you can use to protect your vision and what most people don't know about corrective lenses.
You mentioned these near-focused tasks, like using devices. Could you say a little bit about what the effect is of devices, particularly on children developing myopia?
Absolutely. And I think to explain, it would be best to illustrate with an eye model, if that's okay.
Please.
For the audience. So in this eye model, I've shown this before in previous programs. So basically, when we look at the eye, we just see the very front part of the eye. But there are many structures inside the eye. So I'm going to give you a peek inside. That there are many, many structures inside the eye. But I'm going to show you one area in particular as I take apart the eye model. This brownish area here is called the ciliary body, and that is contiguous with the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. But there's a muscle in here called the ciliary muscle, the ciliary body muscle, and it's responsible for accommodation. And what that means is basically when we're looking at different distances, our ciliary muscle contracts at different amounts to help us focus images properly onto the back of the eye. So, for example, if we're looking at distance, the ciliary muscle is more relaxed and we're focused for far distance. When we're looking at something either at near, let's say about 14 inches or 33 centimeters, or even at intermediate distance, for example, our computer screen, that ciliary muscle has to contract. So that accommodation process is going on. And we think that when someone is accommodating quite a bit, that may be a trigger in children for the eye to elongate and to get longer, leading to myopia. So going back to your question, Brandon, you mentioned about near tasks, what could this link be between increased near work and myopia? It's because the ciliary muscle back here is constantly accommodating, and it's basically causing a trigger in the eye to elongate. That's what we believe. That's the theory out there.
Constantly tight, constantly.
Exactly, it's constantly working, and normally, I'll give you some perspective. If you think back to our ancestors in the hunter-gatherer stage of the civilization, most of the time our ancestors were looking in the distance. They were looking far off into the distance. They were, they were monitoring for any threats in the environment, and very little of their world was up close. They didn't read, they didn't usually write for prolonged periods of time. Maybe they did some near work like gardening, things like that, but the vast majority of time for our ancestors was spent looking far in the distance. So this shift from looking in the distance primarily to now most of our world, especially because we're on devices, is right here. And that means that the ciliary muscle is constantly active, leading to this trigger of myopia.
So this is kind of like an adaptation or a maladaptation to the circumstance of being constantly looking at devices and being near focused excessively.
Exactly, and actually that's one of the strategies we use when we're addressing myopia, progression of myopia. We do encourage our patients, especially children, to spend less time focused up close. So whether that be taking breaks if they're doing any device work or computer work, or reading, even reading a book, for example, for hours on end, will stress that muscle of accommodation, that ciliary body. So any kind of near task is going to recruit that muscle and cause this accommodation process. Rather, again, going back to what I said earlier, taking frequent breaks is important to reduce the near demand. So instead of reading for 3-4 hours on end, whether it's a device or screen or book, schedule breaks every 20 to 30 minutes and let your eyes relax and look off into the distance. So you're relaxing that ciliary muscle. In ophthalmology, we call this the 20-20-20 rule, which is basically every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break by looking at an object 20 feet away. way. So either look at something way across the room or maybe look out the window to allow that accommodation to relax. And then you can resume your near activity. The other thing that I think is really important, and perhaps a lot of people in the public are not aware of this, is that if someone is myopic, let's say their prescription, myopia is basically a prescription that's in the minus range. So -1, -5, -10. These are examples of myopic prescriptions. If someone is myopic and it's a relatively mild degree of myopia, let's say -5 or less, their natural focal point is actually here, like very close to their face. So if they're wearing their glasses or contacts for reading, that's really not necessary because they're naturally able to focus here. So I always tell parents of children who are myopic in that range of again, up to -5, that the children should take off their glasses for reading. Because what's happening is the glasses are prescribed for distance. And the child's wearing the glasses, and then they look from distance, and now they're reading wearing those that distance prescription. That ciliary muscle has to work even harder to help them focus. So basically, it's really, really important for parents to realize this, that if a child is prescribed myopic correction, wear it mainly for distance and try to avoid them wearing the glasses or contacts for reading or computer use.
Following on from that, Dr. Bannock, I understand that there's this circumstance where a person over a period of time will be repeatedly assessed and have their correction for their glasses raised, but that this isn't necessarily needed and that this can actually progress their myopia. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, and actually, I've had that experience myself. I've lived through that experience.
To see that full interview and others on how to optimize health, go to ept.ms/vital signs. Vital Signs offers general health information not intended as medical diagnosis or advice. Please consult your doctor before undertaking a new health regimen.
The government shutdown's impact is affecting Social Security in some ways while keeping essential services intact. Here's what to watch out for. Social Security and supplemental security income payments are still set to go out according to schedule, but Social Security offices are running reduced services. You'll still be able to replace a Social Security card, apply for benefits, and perform other essential services. But things like obtaining letters of proof and getting earnings record updates will have to wait. The Social Security Administration's website will keep updates on what can and can't be done right now. The agency announced a cost of living adjustment for this year. The 2.5% adjustment could add a $50 monthly increase to Social Security checks to keep up with inflation. Recipients who were overpaid could see 50% of their benefits withheld so the government can recoup the money. An independent documentary exploring the attack on free speech making its debut in the nation's capital. NTD's Sam Wong has more on the screening of God Complex, the rise of America's censorship machine.
On Thursday, a new independent documentary titled God Complex was screened at the Burke Theater in Washington, D.C. Produced by Big Picture Originals, the film delves into how powerful institutions work with big tech companies to control narratives online. It explores censorship in America and explains why it considers the issue significant.
If you were going to build a society that's going to allow freedom and opportunity and prosperity and security and happiness for its citizens, this movie provides the cornerstone, in my opinion.
In many ways, I'm just so glad they made this movie to educate American people that people know that you have no freedom under communism, but they are losing freedom here.
Produced by Big Picture Originals, the film delves into how powerful institutions work with big tech companies to control narratives online. It explores censorship in America and explains why it considers the issue significant.
The censorship industrial complex is the set of institutions that range from government, private sector, civil society, and media that all shape the distribution of news and information on social media. Once you get into the business of having a government tell people what they can't say, there's almost never a case where that turns back.
The film also traces the source of censorship and control of information to despotic regimes like the Chinese Communist Party. Those who survived tyranny said they're seeing a recurring pattern.
What's happening in China is they control everything. I remember if you say something wrong, someone reported you, and the police will come and get you physically. But now they just control it through the app. You can have access to your money in the bank. You can buy train ticket. You can't send your children to whatever college. It's just everything is controlled. You don't even have to see a policeman.
God Complex premieres on October 16th, and it will be available to watch online for free. Sam Wang, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Coming up, President Trump flying to the Middle East, planning to greet the Israeli hostages in person. Two guests join us to unpack the latest in the upcoming hostage release and President Trump's peace plan. And popular national parks are partially reopening despite the government shutdown, and a professor at Clemson University in South Carolina says the protected green spaces offer something critical, a chance to reconnect with nature in the digital age. Details in just a minute after this quick break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump is on his way to the Middle East, where he plans to greet the released Israeli hostages in person. He will address the Israeli parliament and then meet with world leaders in Egypt. Joining us now to unpack all of this are two guests. Jacob Olador, Director of American Security at America First Policy Institute, as well as David Wormser, Senior Analyst for Middle East Affairs at the Center for Security Policy. Thank you both so much for being here. Now, Jacob, starting with you, President Trump plans to greet the released Israeli hostages in person, according to Vice President Vance. Now, Israel is expecting the 20 living hostages to be released early Monday morning, in just a few hours, actually, with the Palestinian prisoners released once Israel has confirmed all their hostages have crossed into the border into Israel. What do you see being done to ensure a safe return of the hostages?
Well, thank you so much for having me. As we know from prior experiences during this horrific 2-year ordeal, Hamas will try any number of games in their playbook. We saw with the tragedy of the Bibas family, how they returned a casket with a padlock without the key, and it turned out to be somebody else in there. So my impression is, obviously, the Israeli officials are preparing for any given scenario. This is especially the case with the deceased bodies. And we're already getting reports on the living hostages about a very dire condition that many of them are in, not surprisingly, in such horrific conditions. So a very, I think, intensely emotional period we're entering right now.
And David, the hostage release and prisoner swap is part one, or phase one, of the deal. Now, President Trump is set to address the Israeli Knesset and then join world leaders at a summit in Egypt. In terms of President Trump's 20-point framework here, it includes disarming Hamas and having a temporary transitional government. How much of a role do you see President Trump playing in ensuring that this peace plan gets implemented?
Well, I think the president plays a central role. He's played a central role in getting us to where we are and getting these hostages out. Really, without him, none of that would have happened. But the problem that we have going forward is that Hamas, it's a terrorist organization, so its word is not its word. And though it agreed to the agreement in the overall 20 points, it hasn't had specific agreement on all those 20 points. And now it's walking back. It claims it won't give up power and it won't surrender its weapons, and we see really a civil war emerging among the Palestinians in Gaza because there are factions that now have sided with Israel. And because Hamas doesn't want to give up power, it is right now slaughtering those factions and those clans. So there's an immense bloodletting already underway there among Palestinians. And that tells me they have no intention of surrendering power or their weapons in the long run. And that's going to be a real challenge for both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, because at the end, that might require a resumption of hostilities.
And Jacob, given all of that, what do you see as the role of Arab nations here? How do we ensure another October 7th doesn't happen?
Right. Well, further to David's point, I think we are in a very unique transition period right now. I mean, obviously, this historic moment came about in part because President Trump created such profound diplomatic isolation for Hamas among Arab partners, and I think that'll be the focus of the summit at Sharm el-Sheikh to build on that consensus and to build a plan forward. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think a number of states, especially Qatar and Turkey, which have obviously outsized voices in Hamas's fate, their next steps in all of this. And so, of course, a lot still unresolved, but, much to be expected in the coming days.
And David, on that note, part 15 of the 20-point plan includes mentioning Israel and Egypt to, help secure the border there. What are your thoughts on the role of Egypt and other Arab nations here?
Well, Egypt really has to step up to the plate. They were a major part of the problem before October 7th because they were supposed to have secured the border. And as we saw, the border was porous. There was a tremendous amount of corruption in the Egyptian military that allowed a large amount of weaponry and weapons precursors to get into Gaza to build the sort of military force that it had to attack Israel on October 7th, all that was supposed to be prevented by the peace treaty. So Egypt sort of failed on that whole task. And again, a part of it was corruption. Egypt now is being given a second chance. So it really has to step up to the plate also and deliver on this promise of controlling the border and really keeping contraband and stuff that could be used for military purposes from getting into Gaza. Again, it's a problem, though. Egypt itself, it's not entirely in control of all the tribes and all the structures in the Sinai Peninsula adjacent to Gaza. So it's not clear that it's going to be able even to execute its obligations here.
And Jacob, as we wait for phase 1 to kick in, what will this peace deal look like in practice? What is the timeline we're looking at here?
Well, I think effectively the war is coming to an end with phase 1 of the deal. Now, phase 1 may actually draw out, especially with the identification and location of the deceased bodies. That actually, we're hearing from Israeli officials today that actually could take substantial time, potentially. But effectively, and hopefully, with all of the hostages being released, Hamas effectively gives up all of its cards, and then it's kind of a whole new game out there. The planning for the day after, that's all happening, in my view, within a more of a peacetime setting. And Israel has basically, and other states have, the off-ramp they need to move past the Gaza war, which everybody is hopeful for at this point.
And David, speaking of that peacetime setting, before October 7th, the Saudis were actually in talks to join the Abraham Accords. Now, with this deal, kicking off or being signed, how likely are we to see the Abraham Accords expand? Which countries would sign on?
Well, sure. In many ways, it's pretty clear that one of the objectives in launching the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas and its patron, Iran, was precisely to derail the Saudi-Israeli rapprochement that was leading to peace. The Saudis here put out to help the Palestinians, and they laid out conditions that there has to be some framework that gives some hope for a Palestinian state. And in the 20-point plan, there's sort of a vague commitment in that direction. And it's quite possible for the Saudis that may be enough now to go over the threshold and enter into peace with Israel. The logic behind peace, though, is not really the resolution of the Palestinian issue for the Saudis. There are deeper issues and deeper strategic interests that Saudi Arabia shares with Israel that have been driving them together. So even if there's no formal peace, what we have is a very meaningful strategic cooperation between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE right now that is in many ways more important than a formal peace treaty.
And Jacob, very briefly, how does this progress towards peace in the Middle East fit in with American security?
It very directly fits in, as we know well from our history. However much we want to leave the Middle East, it will come back to bring us in bad ways if we don't have a productive and prosperity-focused framework, which, of course, this administration has. And so I think it's in everybody's interest to create a more stable, peaceful, and prosperous region, not just for communities that live there, but also for the American people as well.
Well, Jacob Aladar, David Wormser, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, popular national parks are partially reopening despite the government shutdown, and a professor at Clemson University in South Carolina says the protected green spaces offer something critical, the chance to reconnect with nature in the digital age. And art meets science in a new exhibition in Milan. Find out how the new exhibition is using CT scans and X-rays to reveal hidden layers behind 8 masterpieces. That and more after this quick break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. New York City's Grand Central Terminal is making space for an immersive art experience. It's called Dear New York. Running through next Sunday, the first of its kind exhibition features photographic installations created by Brandon Stanton, who has photographed up to 10,000 New Yorkers over a decade.
We're New Yorkers, and we heard about this exhibit and wanted to come and experience it. It's unexpected. I mean, even though we were aware of the exhibit, that's why one of the reasons why we came. But just to have, everybody walking past and running to catch trains, and then all of a sudden, you have a little bit of calm over here. Inside Grand Central Station is a pianist who's, so you see the commuters rushing past, not paying any attention, and then a few people kind of like saying, I don't have to rush so fast. In the midst of Grand Central Station, I can enjoy something that's really beautiful.
I love photography, so I thought this would be an interesting exhibit to look through, but I just started looking at it. It looks really interesting so far. It's easier to see. I walk through here 5 times a day, so it's great that this is here.
Brandon Stanton's project highlights portraits and stories of New Yorkers. Since it started in 2010, it has gained popularity on social media and even led to 4 published books. The installation is described as a love letter to the city. It showcases massive 50-foot tall photos and quotes projected on the terminal's main concourse walls. It also highlights additional portraits on 150 digital screens, plus more images throughout the subway station. Popular national parks are partially reopening just in time for the busy holiday weekend. Amid the federal government shutdown, some of the funding to reopen is coming from advocacy groups, private donations, and in some cases, state money. But as we spend more time looking at our screens, it's getting more important to reconnect with nature too. That's the message from one professor at Clemson University in South Carolina. Take a listen.
Jeffrey Hallow is a professor at Clemson University's Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management. He's one of many working to protect America's national parks and educate people about their importance.
Our national parks really protect the most special things that we want to preserve in our nation, and that can include wildlife, history, culture, accomplishments, struggles. Our parks preserve everything from the highest mountain in the United States, Denali, to one of the widest canyons, the Grand Canyon that we have, but also some of our accomplishments and struggles.
He says the value of national parks has only grown in the digital age.
National parks provide one really important refuge from being digitally connected and a way to escape that connection, at least temporarily if we want to. And instead of learning and seeing on a screen, we can see a landscape. We can see the actual, landscape that might be on the home screen of our phone. And that is so much more profound, so much more memory making to see that landscape, to be in it, to smell it, to hear it, than to see it through our digital cameras.
Besides serving as a natural refuge, parks offer a financial one too. Hallow explains that they represent 400,000 jobs nationwide and contribute over $55 billion to the U.S. economy. But challenges are mounting. Reports say the National Park Service has lost nearly a quarter of its permanent staff in the last year.
That certainly has large implications for the parks themselves, keeping them open, maintained, healthy, preserved. So that's a profound challenge they're facing.
As for what visitors can do to help.
So while you're visiting, be a good guest, be responsible, follow rules, and be patient with our park employees because they're facing a lot of challenges right now. Outside of a park, so I really encourage people to see their parks, enjoy them. They're out there for them, for you, and so all these wonders are set aside for you as an individual. It's your opportunity to go see them.
Above all, Hallow encourages visitors to enjoy some of the nation's most treasured landscapes while advocating to preserve them.
A once secret passageway in the Colosseum is opening to the public for the first time. The so-called Commodus Passage allowed emperors to enter the arena and watch gladiator fights and other spectacles without mixing with crowds. Here's a closer look.
The passage was named after the Emperor Commodus, who lived from 180 to 192 AD.
This passage is now open to the public. It's the first time, and so they could appreciate what was being an emperor.
The corridor was discovered in the 19th century and linked to Commodus because historical chronicles say he survived an assassination attempt in an underground passage.
And this place was known as the Passage of Commodus. Commodus became very famous after the film The Gladiator because he liked to fight with the gladiators. So when the passage was discovered at the end of the 19th century, in the chronicles is said that Commodus had somebody tried to kill him in an underground passage. So this was very easy to make a match.
The Colosseum Archaeological Park said that it once had marble walls, which were later replaced with plaster decorated with landscapes. It also had stucco work showing mythological scenes on the vault and representations of arena spectacles, including bear fights and acrobats in niches at its entrance.
It was quite difficult to restore this passage because it's a very humid place. As we said, this was inside the foundation, so when they realized the passage, they had to cut lots of drainage passages, so it's very humid, and this is not very good for stuccos and frescoes.
Very damp conditions in the underground passageway have made conservation a struggle.
With a little effort of imagination and the help of a virtual reconstruction, the visitor will appreciate the decorations and the stucco, the frescoes and the marbles that covered the walls that now we see a little ruined.
The corridor is shaped as an S, and archaeologists say the tunnel continues outside the arena, but it is still unknown where it leads. The passage will open to the public on October 27th.
Art meets science in a new exhibition in Milan. CT scans and X-ray images reveal the secrets behind 8 masterpieces, unearthing a multitude of layers hidden behind the iconic images.
Art isn't just something, at times, evanescent or intellectual, but is profoundly material. The ability to observe a work of art through scientific tools, such as diagnostic imaging in this case, allows us to understand, for example, the use of different pigments, the possibility that they may be organic or inorganic, the fact that they may contain unexpected materials in times we perhaps don't expect.
The challenge of this exhibition is to make these techniques known to the general public and also to attract new professions, such as those of physics applied to bioimaging, where art and science collaborate for a new way of studying artworks and enhancing them.
Called Art from Inside, Masterpieces Unveiled Between Art and Science, the multimedia exhibition is organized by the Bracco Foundation and just opened its doors to the public. 8 masterpieces from the 15th to 18th centuries are getting CT scans and X-rays at the Palazzo Reale in Milan. Just like human patients, the scans are being used to determine their health, prevent potential illness, and discover anything that lies beneath their surface. A highlight is Caravaggio's The Fortune Teller and the imaging that reveals a whole other story beneath the masterpiece. An investigative campaign conducted in 2009 using X-rays and complex mathematical calculations found that the canvas on which the artist painted the subject we see today previously featured a Madonna and child rotated 90 degrees with respect to the visible scene. The works on display are not the originals. They are 1-to-1 scale reproductions accompanied by large multimedia screens that show the results of the investigations. The exhibition runs until January 6, 2026. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.